Good morning, dear friends. I think this particular day today, um, International Day on Poverty Alleviation, this is even look at the time of this, because yesterday only when the PM, Honorable PM, made a statement, biodiversity has a huge potential to actually contribute to the poverty alleviation. I think this was one of the very key statement which he has made. In fact, India, like many other developing nations, and particularly the nations which are very rich on biodiversity, will have to look into this issue. I'll just refer back to some of the important development, and first of all, to begin with the 12th five-year plan, the document which ultimately will be taken up with the National Development Council later this year. It talks about the growth which is also sustainable as well as inclusive. So I think you have to just mark these two words. It talks about the growth, the higher growth, but also the element of sustainability and the inclusiveness, which has been very strongly underscored. In fact, Pavan talked about some 375 million people who are dependent in country like us on the bioresources. And I have my own figures to look at. More than 170,000 villages are the villages where many of these communities actually live, which have huge interface with the nature. Now, if you look at some of the programs and initiatives of the government, one program which actually brings together the poverty alleviation and the regeneration of the land, and thereby the biodiversity, water, is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program, which is about 6 billion annual outlay. This is a program which actually has all the elements which look at the livelihood, poverty, regeneration of lands, water, and biodiversity. And this program, I'm sure most of our friends out here in India would be quite aware of it. How strongly this program has contributed to the number one, addressing the employment issue and the livelihood and poverty issues. Second program I also like to mention at this stage is one of the programs is the Ministry of Environment and Forests is now has launched, is the National Mission for Green India. This mission is one of the 8 missions from the National Action Plan on Climate Change, and looking at about 10 million hectares of lands to be regenerated, but also looking at the kind of opportunity which with the eco-restoration happens, but the commensurate benefit to the livelihood of the people. We're looking at about 3 million households being benefited out of this program. So I think if you look at the kind of initiatives which are on the anvil, which strongly take this message that biodiversity conservation has to be very strongly rooted in the livelihood and poverty alleviation strategies. But having said this, we still feel that there is a paradox, which is there is a paradox of poverty amongst the plentiful of bioresources. So if you do the mapping, you will find those rich pockets of biodiversity which also unfortunately house some of the poorest of the poor. Now, this paradox cannot be allowed to continue for too long, and this has to be challenged very strongly, and that is what our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, yesterday said in his speech, that biodiversity and rich landscape with rich biodiversity had huge potentials to contribute to the poverty alleviation programs. Now, one of the things which Pavan actually had very strongly underscored, look at the kind of valuation which you do. Do you really put value on these biodiverse resources which are there in these wonderful landscape, which also unfortunately house some of the poorest of the poor? Now, what kind of ecosystem services these areas provide? Does it really get accounted for? This is a very important point which Pavan actually has made. And how do you factor the GDP concept has to be tweaked as you look at some of these areas, where you also need to factor in the services which these areas provide, and the people out there in these areas have a huge contribution for these services. And you can use both market-based and non-market-based instruments to actually reward these people so that they are able to maintain these ecosystem services in perpetuity, and also they are able to make livelihood sense. So this paradox has to be strongly challenged. Good that we have now a number of programs which are actually showing a good path, and we need to build up, we need to learn from it and take it from there. Thank you very much.